Hello and welcome to this week's episode of How to Be a Great GM. My name is Guy and I am joined by Toby Lancaster. Is that correct? Yes,
that is correct,
yes,
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Toby is from drgames.co.uk and has written this 2D6 Dungeon. In multiple forms now, because you've got quite a few books out.
Yeah.
Haven't you?
Yeah.
Yes.
You've
Lovely.
got Layers and the Realm expansion for that as well.
That's right. And then core rules and the tables codex.
Yeah.
Now, for people who just want to dip their toes in, can they just use the core rules or do they need the tables codex as well?
Well, you need the tables codex. They come as one. I separate them.
As one.
Yeah,
Okay.
I separate them out just for convenience of use because you flip through the tables quite a lot.
Talk to me a little bit more about that convenience of use idea of yours, because that's quite interesting.
I think it's something that I've inherited from maybe things like the red box set and having the rules separate. And it was something I debated, but I thought what I'll do is I can have the rules there as a guide to the game in a sense, but you do need a set of tables to play with it. Now, as part of the game, I included an open license on it that people can create their own tables. So I thought if they had the rules and then they created their own tables, they could have their own tables set with the rule book rather than having to have the codex there. But they are an integral part of the game. You need both to play. There is a free version online where you can download a demo and you get level 1 tables, but the codex there includes 1 to 10. So, yeah.
That's interesting. That's an interesting choice. And the reason why I say it's an interesting choice is because you go, yeah, but everyone's just going to be using a PDF these days. Do people still buy books?
That's a good question. I think yes, they do. I'm a strong believer in it myself. This game is basically it plays on nostalgia, but it gives you the option to use the PDF. So a lot of people will do a combination of the two. They can maybe use the PDF as reference on a tablet there, or they'll flip through the book, because part of this game is actually drawing the dungeon maps to yourself. So you're going back to that kind of that early state when you're like 11 and you're playing D&D for the first time. You've opened up the red box and you're drawing your map. And I wanted to draw upon that side, that history, and incorporate it in this game. And so the physical side of it is important. Having the books there, I feel, is important. And as a consequence, we've done a series of different bindings. So you can have it, the paperback bind you got there. You can also have it ring bound, the spiral bound hardback as well. So there are a number of options. And a lot of people do prefer the spirals, which is something I wasn't really too aware of until we really started this, because I like that spine on the bookshelf where you can read the name and it kind of is part of your collection. But there's some really players who don't really care for that so much. They like it, but they're also very keen to be able to lay a book open. Right. And so that has been a learning process. So the whole physical side of it, it's funny you should say that. The whole side of it, with these books, I would say they're like any paperback. If you get a paperback off your shelf and try and lay it flat, it's just not going to work, is it? They're designed to be flipped through. But if you buy the spiral, you can just lay that open and it's flat and you can easily access the tables. I'm personally a flipper, so I just flip through, read it, and then close it and put it away, put it to the side. So it's that whole physical side has been an important part. But yes, we do include a copy of the PDF with all the physical versions that we sell. So I see that as an integral part of the book and the package, if you like. But the response has been overwhelming, and in fact, on the Facebook page, you can just see how many people set themselves up with their books and their tablets and their dice, and we share layouts of 2D6 dungeon setups, and it is an important part of it, and it's a valuable object. It's an object you can treasure as well.
I think that is something that And I know you watching have no idea what this game is about, but that's because we're on an interesting thing here, and it's not even in the list of questions that I gave you because I didn't even think it was going to be a question. But that's the
fine.
joy of these things, right? Is
Yeah.
that you're learning and you're exploring. I've done Ringbound before as well. I've got a map book which we said has to lay flat on the table.
Yeah.
But it's a nightmare. In our case, the book is hand ring bound, which makes the production cost huge.
Yeah.
In your case, I'm hoping it's automated, so you don't have to worry about that.
We don't do that. Our printers does it, but we're lucky because the numbers that we get are high enough for us to bring the cost down. But you're right. That was one of my initial concerns, the cost. It's not as expensive as having a hardback printed, but so it's sort of in between. I was always concerned that maybe the spiral might be damaged in transit. You know, then it gets squashed and the metal gets a bit funny, doesn't it? But no, I mean, we went for the highest quality spirals, the metal wire ones, and it's worked a treat. So we're very lucky, and we haven't had a problem with that side of it, really.
Yeah, we haven't had a problem with the actual binding. It was just it was something different. So I mean, we don't manually hand bind them. But I do remember Martin, my graphic designer, and I having to go down to the printers and show them, this is page 1, this is page 2, this folds this way. Because it's a complicated unfold, right? So it's got to unfold correctly. Yeah, it's not like page 1, page 2. It's like, well, this goes here. So that was a bit more complicated. But just choosing the binding and you discovering... that some binding is more appropriate for the content, even though it's a rule book, it's a role-playing book.
Yeah.
You're going, who would have thought spiral or binders?
It's because of the tables. It's because of the tables. I don't think it would have been such an issue if it had just been the rule book, but we just find that people like to be able to lay the table open and read from it rather than hold it and read it. We didn't offer it on the first campaign on 2D, but when it came around to the Realm campaign on Kickstarter, we offered that in, and loads of people bought the original rules in the spiral bound as well.
Right, because of that. And as you say, there's this culture of sort of, this is my layout, but now this is speaking more to the culture of the player going, this is my space. I'm taking time out. This is my time. This is my space. I've got my coffee there. I've got this there. I've got this there, and I've got that there. Yeah. Which is it's not necessarily something that you think about when you are talking about role-playing games.
And I would say this concept has evolved quite heavily since COVID. And I think that what's happened is the solo player arena has really opened up, and people want to be able to role play on their own, having had 2 years at home, in a sense, where they're getting back into the swing of things, and they're realizing that was a kind of special space. They're setting up their own space where they can then be in their own little world, and it really has been amazing, and as a result of that, we have people making custom setups, 3D printed stuff which slots into this little zone where they can go into. And 2D6 Dungeon is designed so that you can leave it and then come back to it, and do like a couple of rooms and then go back again, and so you can have a space set up where you're exploring the dungeon, and getting some of that nostalgia vibe. Yeah,
absolutely. That's brilliant. All right, so let's tell people, what exactly is 2D6 Dungeon? What is the goal? What is the core?
So it draws upon sort of classic red box D&D, Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, where the focus is the dungeon. So you basically you head. There are a couple of main systems within it. So the first one is generating the dungeon itself. There's a whole system whereby you do that, and you use dice, and there are some rules about doors and positioning and stuff like that. It's relatively straightforward. I know people who have used that to generate dungeons for their crew, their sessions, and then you go into each room and you roll to see what that room is as you encounter it. So there's you go to a particular table, and then it reveals what that room is. Now that may lead on to some further table rolling or an encounter where you fight, and or it may be that you implement what I call inventive usage. So inventive usage is a self-DMing license, if you like, where you can say, because of the description, there may be a table and a high ledge. The description doesn't tell you to climb on that table to reach the high ledge, but you decide yourself, is that viable? Can you do that? And then, or it maybe you take some ingredients that are there and create something, or it may say that there's water, there's a fountain. You can dry your blooded hands because you do get status changes in the game as well. So there's inventive usage, the generation, and then there's the combat system, which is something that I worked very hard on to try and create something that was kind of unique, because and this isn't me doing these other things a disservice, but one roll to hit for me has always been, and then one number as a result, has always been quite kind of random in a way. What I wanted to try and do was create something that was more dependent on shifting dice. So you can spend points, your shift points, to shift the dice to particular combinations of numbers that then match up or marry with an attack, or what we call maneuvers, or it may match the enemy's armor, and in that way you get this little kind of dance of dice. And then you also have a fatigue die, so it gets easier to hit as you fight. So we've got these three main kind of concepts within the game: your inventive usage, your own kind of DMing that you do. You've got the generation of the maps, and then this combat system. And then you go down the 10 levels. There's 10 levels. Each level is themed. So you've got different types of monster. You've got different names for it. It's an operational dungeon. I have to think, how am I going to make this dungeon real, so to speak? Because so often you go into a dungeon, just random monsters. Back in the old days, some of those monsters in some of those dungeons, how did they get there? What were they doing? For me, I'm kind of more, I want it to sort of be functional. I want it to people understand. So this is a human ancestry dungeon, this first one. So you go, people are living on the first couple of levels, and then after that there's a crypt, and then it works down, it becomes haunted, and you get the menagerie, and you get more high-powered creatures lower down, and there's a kind of a natural progression to how potentially a 10-level dungeon might operate. And all the creatures that I've designed in there have their own little flavor, and they kind of fit in with that, with each level. And it's really it's on many levels. It's trying to be a pure dungeon experience. It's like I think without too much baggage around it, I just wanted someone to take a hero and go in and play this dungeon in their own space, and be licensed, have a license to do that, and not be too constrained by the rules as well. It's quite it's really sort of designed for the I want the player to enjoy it. And
okay, fantastic.
Write a narrative.
Yes, that's correct, that's right.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about, because you've touched on a lot of very interesting things there in terms of your combat being more dice shifting. I'm just looking. I mean, the rules are really, really clearly laid out, and that looks that's what you need. You don't want to be sort of searching, unlike second edition or first edition Advanced Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah.
Where they would say, right, reference this thing in that book, and then you go to that book, and that book says, no, you can't reference it here. You got to reference it to somebody else. So is it only solo? You couldn't play this with a couple of friends?
Well, that is a good question. I've been asked that many times, and
I'm sure
as it happens, with the new update, I have put in multiplayer rules, so you can. But it naturally lends to two players as well. One can play the role for the monsters and the rooms, while the player just can do the adventure. It is aimed at a solo player adventurer going through the dungeon, and there's a forward momentum. You keep moving forward within the game. It's not one necessarily where you go back and keep searching. You can do that, but it's all about not being discovered and pushing on through the dungeon. So it's very much you if you lose a fight, that's it. You're done. You're dead.
That's it. Okay, so we are going back old school.
It is. Right. There is a certain old school element to it, but yet that is computer games. It's inspired by computer games as well. You know, there's a kind of sense of retrying each level, trying it and not trying to keep going.
I like that.
Yeah.
There is a bit of practical sort of side of things. There are a few illustrations in the book. A few bits of artwork here and there. I mean, the cover is great.
Yeah, Dean Spencer.
Right. So I wanted to talk about that. Artwork you commissioned, folks. Did you upskill yourself? I've had some guests who are like, well, I taught myself, art quickly.
So some of it is obviously stuff that I've bought. So I think Dean Spencer art there. Some of it is art that I have commissioned. Some of it is stock art. So it's a whole range of things. For that particular book, it was obviously the first one before they kind of took off. Right. So we were kind of more limited on budgetary side of things, to be honest.
Yes.
But we don't have a lot of art in our books. It's not about that so much. It is about the table. It's about the word more than anything, because it exists in the theatre of the mind.
Absolutely.
I haven't gone out of my way to make any art for those. It's just small thumbnails. So
exactly, it's a reference point. It's like, do you really need a picture of a warrior? Do you know what a human warrior looks like? Yes, you do.
Exactly.
So fill it with more information than with anything else.
And that is my approach with those. I've always said to people that those are my little spreadsheets rather than cards. They're just little spreadsheets of information that people can access. And and this is the thing about when people imagine a warrior, each one imagines their own warrior. And that's what I like, the thought of people putting their own interpretation on what they're playing. And that some could argue that's a bit of a cop out, but it's the truth.
No,
it's the truth.
Think it's true. You are in a creative space, so you might as well embrace that creativity. Toby, when it comes to issues that you had when you were originally designing the system, were there any things that sort of leapt out at you? You were speaking about trying to make the combat more dynamic. Did you have any difficulties with the system?
For me, whenever I'm designing anything, I always compare it to life. So I tend to avoid grabbing abstract concepts, kind of straight spreadsheet stuff. I like to imagine how I would do something if I was fighting. So the whole shifting premise came about for me thinking, well, if I'm striking somebody, but I want to change the angle or avoid something, I will naturally move my body and shift. And that's as simple as that. When I was thinking about the system, how could that work? And it was me applying a kind of a visual concept into the dice, putting it into that. How would I work the dice? And I often do that. I often put myself in a position where I imagine myself in that particular location, and I think, what would I do? What are the odds? What are the chances? What's realistic? And then that's like food for how the concept then evolves. So, and I'm also thinking, so I'll develop that concept, and it will just sometimes be an idea that pops into my head. I'm thinking about it, and then I will then play that a little bit, and then I'll think, oh, this needs slightly tweaking. It's going on too long. What in real life would happen if I just kept hacking at somebody? I'd get tired, I'd get fatigue. Now, there are fatigue systems in lots of games. But for me, this was just a natural progression with the combat system. How the people would get tired. It would be, in a sense, easier to hit someone who was tired. So I thought, right, that's a great way of making the combat shorter. So I then put that into the actual mechanic of the game. And so they're kind of like the two core elements to that. But
Okay.
I think that's generally the sort of approach that I take, is I think about how you can break down the assets of somebody and or something of that moment, and then try and transfer that across.
Did you have any challenges with balance? So you kind
Yeah,
of go, okay, well, this is the player character, this is the monster. The monster looks fair.
yeah,
And then suddenly you realize, oh my God, everyone's dead. The monster's too powerful.
absolutely.
Was
You
that just
do.
through playtesting?
Yeah, play. I mean, I'm very lucky. We've had tens, if not 100 playtesters, and they give me feedback. I think there's definitely an instinct as you're doing it. You feel like that might be too much, and you kind of you hit a level, and you kind of say, right, there's going to be a little bit of play here. Could go either way, and yeah, it is a bit like that. But
Yeah.
then it is just a question of, say, changing the amount of health points that a creature has, or removing a particularly powerful attack if that's killing too many people. I'm also inclined to leave in the things that are slightly harder than people expect,
Right.
as the
Yeah.
challenge, as the unexpected boss on a level, say, for example. Like the alchemist on level 1 is particularly hard because he can throw potions as
Right.
you fight. And and people have died to this character. I think someone died twice to the
Yes.
character, and I was like, they were like, well, shouldn't we maybe change the potions, or not allow it to do that?
Make it a bit
I was like,
easier.
well, think about it like this: if you beat them next time, it's going to be much more of a result, isn't it? You're going to feel much better for it.
Absolutely.
You know,
Absolutely. 100%. Have you ever had a situation where you have play tested it and everything's fine, and then someone goes, oh, yeah, but what are your rules on, say, opening doors? And you've suddenly realized that you have had, you missed out a whole rule. Have you ever done that, or is it just me?
yes, no,
Oh,
absolutely, yeah. I fully expect it. I fully expect it. I think what you have
yes.
to hope is, I mean, as the designer, you just don't cover everything. It's just not, because your mind is more focused on the creative side of it. What you need to be able to do is hand it off to loyal people who are analytical and precise, and you hand it. I mean, I've got guys who are they just will nail things. They'll just play it and they'll go, Toby, this needs to be slightly changed, or that is missing, or this is missing. And that is very natural. I would say anybody designing, don't expect to get it 100% right when you're doing it. It is particularly tricky to cover all the bases, but to a certain extent, that throws up questions. When you do get faced with something like that, I would say, don't always just give the obvious answer. You may think there's some other things you could add in here. Like maybe there's other goals that could be achieved, or it's not as straightforward as upping that person's hit points. It just might be that you need to adjust something else. So you need to look at it and think about it carefully. But it's always really nice. I'd say to people who test my games that I'm not precious, and that they can say what they like within reason. And then so I get the honest opinion. And
Yes.
I'm just actually in the process of just finishing another game at the moment. And so we're going through exactly what you're talking about here. In fact, it's a slightly different game. Alien Sanctuary it's called. And I'm actually launching it tonight on Kickstarter. I didn't mean to sort of bring that up as like a
Okay.
promotional thing.
Yes.
But yeah, but I'm having exactly that thing at the moment. We're just fine tuning all the rules. And I've got one guy, Jeff, he will tell me, he's very smart and much smarter than me. And he then goes, he says, well, you might need to readjust 0.2 to 0.4 because 0.5 does this or something like that.
Right. Right.
So I'm really lucky. And I would say that if you can build up a good loyal group of play testers and backers, that is invaluable when it comes to creating something that is big. Like this is 260 pages, and that it's all very well doing a smaller book, but when you're getting bigger, you need a team of people who you can rely on.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've got some amazing folks who they go, oh, you've just added this rule in, but you've forgotten about the rule that you wrote a year ago, that now suddenly if I did this, and that, this would happen. And you're like, how did you remember that rule? So there it is. I mean, would you recommend that folks start small, or should they just dive in and just go for it?
It's such a great question. It is such a great question. I think there are different ways of doing it. I mean, my journey into this was I tried to start big. So I tried to do a board game, I don't know, 5 years ago now. And I'd made, because my background is art and design, and I was a teacher. I thought, well, I'll make this. I can make the game. I can make the tiles. Play tested it with lots of people. Everybody loved it. I thought people are going to love it. and then I put it on Kickstarter. Tried to make it look as good as I could, and of course, no one knew about it, and no one's going to back something they don't know about. And unfortunately, as good as a platform Kickstarter is, it doesn't shout these games from the highest buildings for you all the time. You get a little bit of
hundreds of them, aren't there?
Exactly. You can't expect to do it. So I took a step back and I thought, right, that approach didn't work. And they say you've got to learn from your mistakes. And so I thought, right, I will start small. So I set up. I basically did a one-shot AD&D adventure. D&D adventure, 5e. And I thought what I'll do is I will try and build up a role-playing channel, if you like, of people who are willing to pledge £1 for an adventure. And I did Murder at Morley's, which is like a one-shot adventure. I've done a series of those now. And I began to build up some currency and some following. So, and this was kind of to the side in a sense, so that I could hopefully create myself some space to create my own IP. Because I wasn't able to, I really couldn't justify the time I was spending on building, creating games without any sort of income. Because I've got 3 kids and, and I'm a sole, I'm a small indie publisher. It's myself and my wife, who works full time at the school as well. I'm full time on this now, which is just wonderful. But I created this series of adventures, and it eventually became popular. I was generating a good income through doing this, and I thought, right, well, I'm still determined to create my own games. So I started during lockdown. I thought, right, this is the opportunity. I created a small game. So I thought I'd do the same. So I had the income from the role-playing games coming in, and I was thinking, this is a really great way of supplementing what I want to do. And because I've always been a DM and I've always played lots of role-playing games. And so it just was a natural thing for me to do. And I created a small solo player game called Dark Force Incursion. And a few hundred people backed it because it was cheap and it was quick. And I thought, right, this is it. I'm following the same principle. So I was building up the role-playing. I started a bigger series of hardback books for the role-playing called Infested Buildings. And then I also started at the same time, I did a bigger game called Rad Zone. And that was set in a post-apocalyptic world. Right. So you can see I'm starting to, at this point, I'm thinking, right, I'm struggling to maintain a full-time job and these 2 projects. Right. And Rad Zone funded for about £15,000. And I thought, right, this could be a serious proposition. I thought, right, now I've worked really hard to create this game, and people are interested. I started to, and I thought, right, I need to somehow bring this all together. The role playing, the game development that I've started to do and design, and 2D6 Dungeon started to evolve and emerge. And I spent 6 months working on the rules as I was doing these other projects and working full time as a teacher at a special educational needs school.
Yeah.
So I committed a lot of time. I was working every evening, all weekend, to try and get myself a foundation, a base to be able to create my own IP, which is what you're showing there. And Radzone Totality, the expanded version of Radzone, also really launched. In fact, that's the one that got more funding, but that was the one that really kind of said to me, this is serious, and some serious followers and some great feedback. And I just thought, where have I spent most of my childhood, which sounds really wrong, in a dungeon?
Right.
Let's I want to create something.
I want to go back.
The solo, send me back. No, because the solo play arena had grown and blossomed, and I was getting really involved in it. And I loved the idea of all that, and I just thought, right, now is the time. This is the moment. I've built myself up to this time to create 2D6 Dungeon, and it funded really well on Kickstarter, and I was able to go full time. In fact, I'd already left my job at that point. And yeah, so there was a lot of risk involved.
Yes, of course, always.
But 3 years now full time doing the game design, and but I still do the role play supplements as an additional stream of income.
Of course.
And I sell a lot of stuff through Drive-Thru RPG, itch.io. And I think that if anybody's serious about this, they've got to look at those platforms and see how that can support what they do, And our shop, we have an online shop at drgames.co.uk, and that is very popular.
Links down below.
Yeah, links down below. And that is, we've been mind blown really about how successful the shop has been. And it is all because of the awesome community that has grown up around 2D6 Dungeon. And I think probably one of the biggest tips I could give anybody is, if they want to get into this sort of thing, and is to develop and embrace your community. It really is. I would be nowhere without the backers and the subscribers and the Facebook members, and it has been. They humble me. They look after me. They tell me when things are going wrong. It's like a little community, and I stream live once a week as well, and I get to chat with people. It has been absolutely huge. As I know you're aware, Guy, the community is so important.
It really is. It absolutely is. Well, Toby, I mean, we could carry on chatting forever, but unfortunately we've run out of time. So folks, 2D6 Dungeon, links down below. Go find it, drgames.co.uk. And what a lot of insight. And that's, doing this series, I am absolutely enjoying it, because I spoke to Nathan the other day, and his whole design thing was, how does he translate theme into mechanics? You're about how do you visualize, how do you make think about this physically, and everybody's journey is slightly different as well, but it does come back to being passionate about what you do. I don't want to say believing in yourself, but it's more about allowing yourself to believe in yourself, to go, you know what, take the time, spend that weekend or 20. You got this.
Give yourself a chance. Yeah,
give yourself a chance. You deserve it. Anyway, Toby, thank you so very much. And like I said, all the links down below. And until next time, I wish all of you the very happiest of game design.